Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Cliff and this is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today we're going to be talking about short stories as opposed to novels. We're going to look at why short stories are actually so difficult to write compared to novels. And then we're going to be looking at my favorite short stories and my favorite authors that write those short stories. Please stay tuned. Most people will think novels are the ultimate form of writing. They're long, they're difficult, and short stories, come on, it takes not even half the time. They're short after all, less words to write, must be easier, right? No. The whole question is about space. Long novels, you have a much longer time to build your world, to flesh out your characters, to create a plot and plot lines and develop your story. You also have a little bit of breathing room in terms of making mistakes. You have a little bit of time, if you waffle a little bit, you can get an editor and actually make things a little bit better. Short stories, on the other hand, every word has to be chosen carefully. Every sentence that you construct, you have to have a goal in mind. You don't have the time to develop your characters, so you've got to choose your words carefully to get yourself involved in those characters, to get people to want to know those characters and what's going to happen. You have to know where your end point is going to be, and you have to maintain that interest in the audience. So the audience knows and goes with you, goes with the flow, they're gripped, they're engaged, and they love their story. So many wannabe writers throw in short story after short story and wonder why they don't succeed. It is an art form. Stephen King talks about it in his book on writing, and I really think that it is something that you have to practice to get good at, and there are very few authors that absolutely nail the craft, and I'm going to be talking about some of them today, along with some stories that are favourites of mine. So let's get started. Okay, I did call this my top 10 short stories, but that's not going to be the case. I'm going to be showing you a lot more. First of all, let's have a look at Neil Gaiman. Now, he's produced a great body of work. There are, in this particular Smoke and Mirrors, there are a number of short stories dealing with trolls, dealing with Father Christmas, dealing with all sorts of things fantastical and amazing and terrifying, but he's not going to be in my video. I just thought I'd let you know about him as an author. I love some of his longer novels, but his shorts in this particular book are astounding. Oh, people, by the way, sorry for the interruption, but it is the heat of summer here. It is hot. We are living in South Africa. It's hot and humid. We don't live up there in the ice and snow, and there are flies that you might hear very faintly in the video, and you might see me sweating a little bit. It is hot here. Okay, just so that you're aware. Right, time for a couple of special mentions. First of all, in a thing called Borderlands, it's an anthology, I think it's 4 of them, Borderlands 1 to Borderlands 4. In Borderlands 4, there is an author by the name of Rachel Drummond, who created a very, very short story. Now, I mentioned how short stories are difficult, but shorts, as in 3-4 pages, there has to be something very special about your writing. And in this little short story called 1 in the AM, it delivers a gut punch. Are you afraid of the dark? A man wakes up, he hears sounds, he's nervous, he's a little bit scared, he doesn't know what's going on. He walks downstairs, bumping into things in the dark, and eventually he settles himself down by sitting in front of the TV in the basement and watching some old horror movies. He's okay for now. That's all I'm going to say. This story kicks you in the guts. A lot of fun. Next we have Ray Bradbury, The Veldt. Now this is a book that I find very entertaining and very interesting, a story that I find entertaining, because as a South African I am in love with the bushveld. I was a game ranger for a while, a field guide, and this story kind of hits a little bit of a nerve. It's about a futuristic family, a mom and dad, and two spoiled kids, spoiled brats. And the dad builds them, they're rich, and the dad builds them this very fancy house. It's obviously set in the future, and a whole nursery for these children, which is basically a whole virtual reality that sinks into what they're thinking about. And they keep coming up with this image which they can get immersed in of the African bushveld. Excuse me, of the African bushveld and these lions eating their prey and hunting their prey. And now the dad fears that this thing is becoming way too real. So what he does is he threatens them and says, no, we're going to turn the whole thing off. But these kids are spoiled, like to the point where they threaten the dad and they are crying and weeping. So the dad gives them one more chance. And let's just say things go pretty wrong from there. Now Ray Bradbury is a fantastic writer. I've got a number of his short story collections, but this appears in a book called The Illustrated Man, and sadly I don't own that copy anymore. I'm actually very sad about that because that's my favorite, but this is a fantastic story. The next book is taken from this Penguin book of horror stories, a gift from my wife for Christmas, and that is The Man from the South by none other than Roald Dahl. Now Roald Dahl is famous for his sting in the tail, his stories, short stories with the kind of twist at the end, and this is no exception. Man in the South is simply about two men that have a bet. This American man wants this other man, the South American man's green Cadillac, and they have a bet that if the American man, who has full faith in his cigarette lighter, can light the flame on the lighter 10 times in a row, then the Cadillac is his. However, if he fails, he loses a little finger. This is quite a grim little tale, and I love the way that the tension builds up towards the end, and there's a little bit of a nasty twist at the end. Next we have a classic. Couldn't leave him out of this list, Edgar Allan Poe. And there's no story that stands out for me as much as The Pit and the Pendulum. This unknown narrator, this man, is basically sentenced to death by the Spanish Inquisition. He is not so much thrown into a pit, but he finds himself into this pit. He doesn't know the dimensions of this pit, he's confused, he's terrified, he's lost. And we become as confused and terrified and as lost as him. And this is mainly because of the first person narrator. He really sucks you into this tale. This man has an uncertain future. I mean, the Spanish Inquisition are well known for their infamous torture devices, but Pit and the Pendulum, I suppose that gives you some kind of a clue. But this is a magnificent story from a magnificent writer, often overlooked because it's classics, but I'm sure most of us have maybe read The Raven as a poetry thing in school, or The Black Cat, but I really need to get into more of his writing. I haven't read enough, not nearly enough. Next we have 3 stories from this magnificent compilation, Dark Forces. Stephen King is in here as well, but there are some fantastic stories in this, and I've chosen 3 of my best. First we have The Night Before Christmas by Robert Bloch, and that's none other than the filmmaker of Psycho, the director of Psycho, and it deals with a struggling artist who is given an opportunity of a lifetime, he can barely put food on the table, where he gets to draw portrait the wife of this very rich and this very huge man, the Spaniard, and he becomes attracted to this wife, and he starts chatting to her and gets more intimate with her, and when they fall in love, bad things start to happen. They have an affair, they want to run off, and let's just say this story has one of the most shocking, brutal endings of any short story I've ever read before. Okay, the next story in that compilation is The Late Shift by Denis Etchison. Concerned Mackley and his pal, his Indian pal, and they're basically driving home after 12 o'clock screening of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And they stop at one of those 24-hour deals where you can open all the time, but the clock there doesn't seem quite right. He seems a little bit dazed, confused, he seems a little lost, and it doesn't look too good. Now, later on that week, when Mackley's buddy has an accident, a car accident, the police tell him it's because of drinking and driving. The thing is that this is not at all like his buddy, and there's something very wrong there. He goes to visit him in hospital, and things go downhill from there. This becomes a very strange, very dark story, very interesting story with a lot of dread, and I just love the places it goes to. A fantastically well crafted story. The last story is Dark Angel by Edward Bryant. Now this is a brutal tale of revenge where a businesswoman, Angie, is with a client in a cafe. She notices that an old flame, what's his name? His name is Jerry, and she notices him in the cafe. Now Angie is not just any kind of businesswoman. She seems to be dabbling in dark arts. This is not a spoiler, this is in the first couple of pages of the story. And Jerry is not so much an old flame as the guy that left her 20 years ago when she was pregnant, which resulted in all sorts of trauma for Angie. Angie flirts with him, takes him to bed, and really things go to hell in the story. It is one of the darkest, most depraved, twisted acts of revenge I've ever read in any short story. Give it a go, you'll be shocked. Next story we have Some Children Wander by Mistake by John Connolly from Nocturnes. You might remember in my previous video I did the Book of Lost Things, but he is an excellent short story writer as well, and this is well worth getting your hands on. There are a number of stories I could have chosen, but this is my favourite. It deals with William, and William is in a small town and he's bullied at school and he's very small himself, and he's never been to a circus, and he's always wanted to go to a circus. And apparently the only time the circus ever went by his town, because it's not the kind of town where the circus would want to go to, you know, one of those backward towns, was when he was still in his mom's tummy and he wasn't born yet. Now the circus is coming to town and he goes with his family to the circus. All I can say is, don't let your children wander. You might run into something like clowns or some other creature in the circus, and you just don't want to do that. Now, as you know, I've said this so many times, I love clowns, I love circuses, I love dark carnivals, so I don't know, it's just something that draws me to that. I think it's when I was a kid we used to have these rides in Port Elizabeth where I grew up, and it was always a special treat going at night to see all the lights and, you know, go on the Ferris wheel and all of that. And I kind of miss that. So these kind of stories really appeal to me. Okay everyone, now we get to probably the most sickest, disgusting story I've ever read, or one of them, and that's from both the short story format, the novel format, whether it's plays, whether it's whatever. That is Survivor Type by Stephen King. Now that is no Tom Hanks Castaway. There are no baseballs for him to play with, sorry, basketballs. There is no food, and this man that is trapped on the island, maybe there's a few birds. The only thing that he has access to from the ship that sunk is matches, a lot of heroin, and a first aid kit. And did I mention that he is a surgeon? Right, I think that's all I've got to say about that now. Okay everyone, now for my number 3 spot. We got another dark, disgusting tale. I don't think it really is as bad as the last one I mentioned, but we're talking Midnight Meat Train by Clive Barker from the Books of Blood. Now I know I've got in my hand here volumes 4 to 6. The next 2 stories are both from volume 1, which is kind of strange because they come after each other right at the beginning, but these are my choices. Midnight Meat Train is hectically disturbing. It starts off where Clive Barker sets a scene of New York City by describing New York City, personifying New York City. It's like this slutty, whorish woman. Describes the seedy underbelly of the city and makes it very clear that the city is dangerous. And it's about two men. There's one guy that's down on his luck, I think it's a Leo, and Mahogany, a serial killer who's been haunting the subways. Now, they meet on the subway at late at night, 3 o'clock, something like that, I'm not sure. But all bloody hell breaks loose. It is depraved, it is sick, it is violent, but the ending is incredibly interesting. And yeah, I can just, the places that this man goes to in his books of blood is just, he goes to dark places. But well worth read if you can stomach it. Other authors don't go there, but if you can stomach it, Books of Blood by Clive Barker. The second place story is also from the Books of Blood, and interestingly enough, it's an opening story to the whole series, and it is called Book of Blood. And basically, the moral of the story is don't mess with the undead, don't mess with ghosts, because the medium who is there at a haunted house where the highways of the dead intersect close enough so that the fabric of reality is thin. This medium is playing games, and he is lying, he's a hoax, and he starts to basically mock the whole idea that there are ghosts, that there are the dead behind this wall. And this results in gruesome, bloody hilarity. I actually found this a lot of fun to read, and it is a great opening to the whole series, The Books of Blood. Now this next story is going to surprise a great number of people, because as Stephen King stories go, this would not even be on most people's radar. The top 20, top 30, I don't even think people know much about the story. But it touched me, and I've been haunted by it for personal reasons, but it is very, very special to me. And that is Willa in Everything's Eventual. Now this is a far cry from the other stories I've been talking about. It is not gruesome, it's not even that horrific, but it is a haunting ghost story, stroke love story, that's actually quite sad. It takes place, at first you're introduced to these strange creatures, these strange characters. They're kind of eccentric, and they are waiting for a train. So they're sitting at a train station about 2 miles outside of a really small town, and they want to go further on in the journey. Now David is a little bit lost because he's calling for Willa, because Willa is the love of his life and he can't find her. And he's determined, despite all these other characters, and they're weird, trying to say, don't go anywhere, the train's coming, don't go, you're going to get lost, you don't want to go there. And he decides to follow and go to the town to try and find Willa. Now, I found this little story so moving, and as I said, it has a sort of place in my heart where I actually dreamed of this story as a result of a personal thing that happened in our family. So this story is just so special. And yes, it's maybe not the most horrific story or terrifying story that Stephen King's ever written, but I'm going to maintain that it's my favorite for the reasons that I've said. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed that video. Please tell me what you think in the comments below. What are your favorite short stories, whether it's by Stephen King or another author? Let me know. And please be sure to like and subscribe, follow my channel, and take care, keep those pages turning, and see you all next time. Cheers.